True growth means expanding until you outgrow your limitations entirely. Healthy things grow. You want to grow, you got to be healthy. Healthy things grow. The problem is everything grows. Everything scales, not just the good stuff. Growth always has a price tag. Every step of growth comes with a cost. Your comfort zone is where you feel at peace. Your comfort zone is potentially where your security is right now. But again, going through that ceiling, going through that next level, you will find a new level of security, a new level of trust, a new level of ownership, new level of influence. Influence without responsibility is just noise. It's just noise. You assuming that you're just going to have influence, you're going to be successful, you're going to have a great marriage without responsibility, that's just white noise. Leadership isn't about starting something. Leadership is about completing something. Leadership is not about ideation. Leadership is about execution. It's not supposed to be fun. It's supposed to prune you and grow you. And if you want to grow, again, it's a true discomfort. It's not the cute Instagram reel version of it. It is hard. Growth happens when we pick up the weight, face the challenges, and embrace change. The best leaders, by the way, are the ones who can pivot with change. Your no will be so much more stronger than your yes. Your no tells me what type of a leader you are. If there isn't failure, you're not pushing yourself hard enough to get better. I'm not competing against other people. I'm competing against the opposite of what I want to do. Growth is not optional. It's intentional. It comes with a price tag that challenges your comfort zone and demands transformation. If there isn't failure, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Well, hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. This week we're going to be talking about the price tag of growth. Something that you and I know is growth is not automatic. Growth is about intentionality. And it also comes with a price tag that challenges your comfort zone and demands transformation. The lid is what we're going to be talking about today. The lid is the ceiling that limits your potential. But breaking through it doesn't mean crashing into it. True growth means expanding until you outgrow your limitations entirely. So here's the mindset shift that we're going to start with, and then we're going to get some key points to make sure that it's super practical for you to get challenged on and grow in. Growth isn't about jumping through the ceiling, it's about growing through it. Let's explore in the next 30 minutes, potentially. Let's explore how to lift the lid and embrace the price tag of growth. So again, we're going to jump into the 5 topics of growth. We're going to talk about the 5 ideas of how to actually grow through it, not just hope and assume that you are going to grow in 2025. I think something that you and I often do is we just assume because we're being active that that's equal to growth. And a lot of times this is quoted in podcasts all the time. Healthy things grow. You want to grow, you got to be healthy. Healthy things grow. The problem is everything grows. Everything scales, not just the good stuff. Bad stuff scales. Bad things grow. We know that. There's multiple things that you and I could list right now of negative things that grow. Everything grows. You can grow up. You can grow down. You can grow all around. So again, we're gonna just make this very, very clear. Number 1, growth always has a price tag. Every step of growth comes with a cost. If you want to go to your next level in 2025, if you want to go to your next level of your marriage, of your leadership, of your team, there's a price tag to it. And you got to be willing to pay it. And again, a lot of times in my experience, people are just not willing to pay what it costs to go to their next level. What happens? You become stale, stagnant, burnt out, tired. The things that's going to cost: time, energy, effort, and obviously discomfort. So if you're saying, Josh, I want to grow in 2025. I want to go to my next level. I want to grow through my ceiling. I don't want to just jump through it. There's going to be time investment into this. You're going to have to be intentional about your time. You're going to have to be super specific on where you spend your time. Not just your time, but your energy. Where are you putting your most quality energy towards? That to me is a clear sign of what you value and what are your priorities. It's going to cost effort. A lot of times, this is where it stops, right? You put it on your calendar. You're trying to put energy towards it, but effort, you actually have to try. You have to continue to grow. And the not fun one is discomfort. We obviously know growth is where your comfort zone ends. If you want to go to your next level, It's going to cost you your comfort. Your comfort zone is where you feel at peace. Your comfort zone is potentially where your security is right now. But again, going through that ceiling, going through that next level, you will find a new level of security, a new level of trust, a new level of ownership, new level of influence. Because again, you're willing to pay the price that oftentimes people are not willing to pay. So the question isn't whether there's a price, but whether you're willing to pay it. By the way, there's a price for staying where you're at. There's a price tag to quitting. You're constantly having to measure the price tag of your life because everything costs you something. Just because you think it doesn't mean it isn't. Again, we have to be honest with ourselves in 2025 because if you want to go to your next level, if you want to grow, you have to understand everything has a price tag to it. You staying where you're at, you're staying in the same dead-end job, you staying in the relationship, every single thing, every single decision equals to a price tag. What ends up happening, though, is you don't realize you're in a deficit. You're constantly going negative because you're not filling yourself up. And that's where burnout happens. That's where you're tired. And that's where you end up quitting. So this is not a podcast of you wanting to quit. This is a podcast. This is an episode for you to be intentional about understanding that growth always has a price tag. Second thought here, influence comes with responsibility. Leadership isn't just about having influence. It's about stewarding responsibility. Nobody can tell you what price you need to pay. That's between you and God. But know this, influence without responsibility is just noise. It's just noise. You assuming that you're just going to have influence, you're going to be successful, you're going to have a great marriage without responsibility, that's just white noise. You're just saying something. If you were at coffee and you were telling me about all the things you want to do, but you don't want to be responsible in it, that's not leadership. Leadership isn't about starting something. Leadership is about completing something. Leadership is not about ideation. Leadership is about execution. So for you, if you're a brainstormer, if you're a strategist, if you're defaulted to be a creative who constantly is thinking about new ideas, you got to weigh the cost of responsibility. What weight are you carrying to grow your character and expand your influence? Because this is weighty, right? Like you growing, stepping into a new level of your leadership, it's going to cost you, like we said, and it carries a lot of weight. There's a lot of density to this. And it's honestly not fun all the time either. It's not supposed to be fun. It's supposed to prune you and grow you. And if you want to grow, again, it's a true discomfort. It's not the cute Instagram reel version of it. It is hard. Leadership is hard. Leading people is hard. Having a healthy marriage is hard. But hard does not mean you're supposed to rebel against it. Hard is usually a sign you're supposed to grow through it and allow God to be the person that he is supposed to be in your life. Because again, I can't tell you what price you need to pay. I can't tell you what to be responsible for. That's between you and God. And a lot of times what we do is we just assume that God is behind something because it seems good. Well, it's a good idea. God's behind it. Not potentially. You have to actually sit with him and ask him, am I supposed to be stewarding this? And am I supposed to be building this? Oftentimes, by the way, if it's something that points to your destiny, it's usually him. And if it's something that is opposite to what you feel called to do, it's obvious that it's not a responsible decision or something that you should carry. Number 3, embrace tension, change, and new ideas. Tension isn't something to run from. It's something to lean into. A lot of times what we'll find is when weak leaders experience tension, they run from it. Maybe not practically, but in their mind, they're scared beyond straight. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to lean into it. And a lot of times, again, when you're at the gym, the last rep, you have 10 reps, you go at that 11. That 11th rep is the hardest. It's the one that hurts. And instead of you just going, I'm going to skip it, lean into it. Do the extra rep. Because the extra mile is where the great leaders live. You got to lean into it. 2025, let's lean into tension. Let's lean into change. Let's lean into new ideas. Growth happens when we pick up the weight, face the challenges, and embrace change. The best leaders, by the way, are the ones who can pivot with change. And again, this is just for the Christians watching this. Christianity is not a spectator sport. You want to grow. You want God to use you. You pray that every single day, God, use me. But the second somebody asks you to serve on a team at church, you leave that church because you feel used. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make sense at all. Christianity is not a spectator sport. You're not signing up to just spectate what God's doing. You're signing up to participate in what God's doing because he's called you to do something. Oftentimes, by the way, the things you're frustrated at, you're called to be the solution to, because God's given you eyes to see the things that other people don't see. That's being a leader. So real growth means stepping out of the stands and onto the field. You got to get in the game. It's so easy to be the person who sits on the sidelines and observes how the Phoenix Suns play the game, how Devin Booker plays the game. It's another thing to be Devin Booker and to be in the game. And really, our opinions don't matter as much as we think. Just because you get a lot of likes, just because you get a lot of views on an opinion, it doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it right. Because great leaders lean into tension. We lean into change. And we lean into new ideas. We're not married to methods in 2025. I'm married to change. That's the only thing that I know is going to happen in 2025 is there's going to be change. And when I feel tension, and again, I'm not saying that everything that you experience is usually something you're leaning into. You got to have the self-awareness and discernment to understand the difference between right positive change and positive tension and bad change and bad tension. Sometimes it is okay to say no. Your no will be so much more stronger than your yes. Your no tells me what type of a leader you are. If you say yes to everything, that's not actual tension. Potentially you being a high achiever, the tension in 2025 is your no. Starting to say no more. Loving the word no. Using no like it's your best friend. Because what you say no to tells me what you're saying yes to. And say yes to the right things in 2025. But again, you say yes to tension. I'm going to embrace tension. I know that stretch grows strength. When I stretch, I'm going to grow. And then the outcome is going to be me being stronger, me being a better leader. Say yes to change. Change is inevitable. Growth is optional. I'm going to say that again. Change is inevitable. It's going to happen. Promise you. Something in your life is going to change this year. Positive, negative, all of it. It's happening. But growth, that's where this episode comes in, where I'm going to embrace it. Something happens, let's go. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to double down and make sure that I'm doing what God's called me to do. And new ideas. The best idea is the new idea, right? That's something that we've seen the last decade is whatever the new idea comes in, everybody just jumps on board. It's a bandwagon. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's right for you. Learn how to ask the right questions, the right discovery questions to learn. If somebody is pitching an idea, always pinpoint it back to the outcomes. Outcomes is what I'm worried about. I can't control outcomes, but I can learn based on my experience and wisdom from being a leader that if I put this input in, I'm going to get this out of it. If I deposit something in this, I know what's coming out of it. That to me is having foresight and learning that every idea is not always a good idea, but it's worth listening to. So here's your reality for this point. If there isn't failure, you're not pushing yourself hard enough to get better. Think of any other context. You're working out. Failure is usually a sign you're trying hard. I remember in basketball practice when we would be doing dribbling drills, because I was always a point guard or a shooting guard. And if you weren't failing on a dribbling drill, you weren't trying hard enough because you were just willing to just do the bare minimum so the ball wouldn't fall or ball wouldn't hit your ankle and fall and roll. You got to try hard things. You got to do hard things. Doing hard things is what makes you grow. You got to be willing to fail. That doesn't mean don't practice. That doesn't mean don't try. That doesn't mean try to fail. I'm not trying to fail, but when I understand when I fail, that means I'm not a failure. I just failed. It's just another thing. I get up and try again. The best leaders are willing to persevere and be persistent. If I could do those two things in 2025, I'm better than 99% of the versions of myself that I'm trying to compete against. I'm not competing against other people. I'm competing against the opposite of what I want to do. I don't want to embrace tension. I don't want to embrace change, and I don't like new ideas. That version of myself doesn't like when I get up again. That version of myself doesn't like when I say, I made a mistake, but I'm not a mistake. I'm going to get up and try again. I'm going to get up and try again every single day. What a great opportunity to try again. So again, if there isn't failure, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Growth requires coaching and challenge. If you want to grow your character in 2025, you need to carry something you can't lift alone. That's where coaching comes in. By the way, that's how you build leaders. You go, hey, we're going to carry this together because you can't carry it on your own. And after a while, the weight is going to feel lighter and you're going to be able to carry it on your own. Growth doesn't happen in isolation. It requires feedback, correction, and willingness to be stretched beyond your limits. So if you want to grow your character, you need to carry something you can't lift alone. If you want to grow somebody else's character, they need to carry something they can't lift alone. And that to me is a coach. That to me is a pastor. That to me is a leader. When somebody is willing to carry something with somebody to build them. That's all it's about, right? It's all about building people. It's all about building myself. It's all about building my own character and the version of myself. So again, you got to have a coach. Every single coach has a coach. Every single pastor has a pastor. Every single leader has a leader. You should constantly be learning from somebody, even if you're not personally connected to them. Read every book they have. Listen to every podcast they have. Watch every YouTube video they have. Because growth doesn't happen in isolation. If you want to grow this year, you cannot be in isolation. You can't just do your own thing. God's never wired you, by the way, to be an individualistic person. There's a very, very individualistic culture even in the church in 2025, and we just cannot live in individualism. You being an individualist is a sign that you're not actually submitted to somebody, which tells me you're not actually a leader. You have to be always chasing feedback, always chasing correction and willingness. Man, I want to be stretched. I want someone to challenge me. I want feedback. I want positive criticism. I don't want just negative Nancy who has no fruit in their life telling me what they think and what they don't think. I don't need that. I need the right people to give me feedback, and I need the right people to give me correction. So my question for you is, who is coaching you through the weight of the growth journey? Who's coaching you right now? Who's pushing you to go to your next level? Growing through your ceiling. And a lot of times it's somebody, by the way, that doesn't think like you, that doesn't act like you, who isn't your quote unquote leadership style preference. It's usually somebody that frustrates you. It's usually somebody that you wouldn't agree with on everything. Because why? They're challenging the way you think. They're challenging the way you lead. They're challenging the way you think about people. Because why? It's a different vantage point. So my last point on number 5 is big vision demands big growth. 2025, you and I are not intimidated by big vision. I'm inspired by it. But here's the reality. Big vision doesn't happen overnight. Big vision happens when you accept big growth, big challenge, big correction. You got to start with what intimidates you, by the way. Your lid is tied to the vision, size of your vision, and big vision always requires big faith and persistence. Big vision should intimidate you a little bit. There should be a level of, this cannot happen, and I'm still believing it. That's where the reality is where faith happens. This is a breakdown, by the way, of people who are going to embrace vision, and it could potentially be you. 10% are early adopters, the ones who see the vision from the start. Those are the 10% of humanity, by the way, who are early adopters. This is not even where innovation happens, by the way. This is where people are early adopting the innovative ideas or the patterns that people are assuming. 70% buy in after the price tag was already paid. This is really applicable to church, by the way. These are the people who commit once the hard work begins to show results. So we're a church plant. The 10% early adopters are the people who said yes to launching the church. They're the people who have paid the price tag, showing up early and load in. They're grinding. They're trying their best to build leaders. And there's 70% of the team who is going to show up after that price tag was paid, and they're going to see the results, and they're going to like the results, and they're going to say yes to the results. They're going to say yes to the fruit. And 20% will never come around, and that's okay. They're never going to come around the big vision. They're never going to see the big vision. They're never going to understand the magnitude of the moment. Because why? They weren't there. They don't understand it. They don't have the vision to see it. They're an individualist. It's all about them. The world, their world revolves around them. So again, if you want to have big vision, it's going to require big growth. If you want to grow in 2025, this is the podcast for you. So the bottom line, growth isn't automatic. You can't just assume you're going to grow. You can't just assume that God is going to stretch you. You can't. Assumptions are not where leaders live. Assumptions We know the line. And it's never easy, but it's worth it. Growth is never easy. It's worth it, though. On the other side of you stretching yourself, you're going to be a better leader. You're going to be a better husband. You're going to be a better person. It is worth it. Embracing the lid means embracing tension, the responsibility, and the challenges that come with the call to leadership. If you're called to lead, that means you're called to embrace tension and responsibilities and the challenges that are coming with being a leader. Being a leader is not easy. If you want to be a leader, you're signing up for a lifelong growth pattern. You're going to grow the rest of your life. And again, growth is not automatic and it's never easy. It's not the easy route. You want to be an easy route? Don't be a leader. Remember, we're not just lifting ceilings, we're growing through them. That's two different dynamics, by the way. You just lifting it, you just feeling like you're going to lift to your next season or you're going to grow through your next season. Think about that. You can either have a taller ceiling or you can add a new floor. I want to have another floor to my life. I don't want to just have a taller ceiling. That means you still have one room. I want to have multiple rooms. You want a skyscraper or do you just want a big open room, a studio with a tall ceiling? I want to have a skyscraper type of leadership. If you're ready to grow, ask yourself this question as we wrap up. What's the lid I need to lift? And what price tag am I willing to pay to break through it? You got to embrace the price tag of growth and leadership. Growth is not optional, it's intentional. It comes with a price tag that challenges your comfort zone and demands transformation. The lid is the ceiling that limits your potential. A lot of people have hit their lid. You feel like you're just in the same state every single day. I'm just perpetual state of not feeling like I'm growing. Because you're hitting a lid. You're hitting a ceiling. And breaking through it doesn't mean crashing into it, running as hard as you can and banging your head against the wall. It's persistence that changes. So true growth means expanding until you outgrow your limitations. Again, here's your mindset shift for this episode. Growth isn't about jumping through the ceiling. It's about growing through it. Again, I'm going to read these 5 points. You're going to grow. You're going to go to your next price tag. You're going to count the cost. But Jesus said, number 1, growth always has a price tag. Every step of growth comes with a cost. It's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you energy. It's going to cost you effort. And it's going to cost you a lot of discomfort. The question is, how am I embracing the price tag of growth? The lid you're under today is directly tied to what you're willing to sacrifice and endure tomorrow. Number 2, influence comes with responsibility. Leadership isn't about just having responsibility or isn't about just having influence. It's about stewarding responsibility. What weight are you carrying to grow your character and expand your influence? Number 3, embrace these things. Embrace tension, embrace change, and embrace new ideas. Because here's the reality. If there isn't failure, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Number 4, growth requires coaching and challenge. If you want to grow your character, you need to carry something you can't lift alone. Who is coaching you through the weight of your growth journey? Number 5, big vision demands big growth. I'm not intimidated by big vision. I'm inspired by it. You should not be intimidated by big vision. You should be inspired by it. Because here's the reality. Big vision doesn't happen overnight. It follows a predictable pattern. There's a predictable pattern here in leadership. You're going to have early adopters who count the cost, who pay the biggest price of sacrifice. There's 70% of the people who are going to see the outcome and the results of those people and want to join it. And there's going to be 20% of people who never get it. And you have to be okay with that. Because why? Start with what intimidates you. Start with the big thing. Start with the giant. Because your lid is tied to the size of your vision. And big vision always requires big faith. So if you're ready to grow, ask yourself this. What's the lid I need to lift and what price tag am I willing to pay? Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Conversations. We're in the month of January. Let's grow. This is a month of growth. Every single person, you're in your New Year's resolutions. You're living in it. You're thriving in it. But let's grow through it. Let's embrace the price tag of leadership. Everything has a cost to it. And the primary thing that I believe if you invest in, you'll have the biggest return on your investment is leadership. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you can, subscribe. Maybe if you're listening on the podcast, leave a review if you've enjoyed this content. We're 2 years deep into making episodes, and I don't believe I'm going to stop anytime soon. So thank you again. We'll see you next week.